Jerry Jones says there is no urgency to get a deal done with CeeDee Lamb, and it appears CeeDee Lamb disagrees. All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to discuss the Cowboys joint practice that they had with the Rams on Thursday. We'll tell you who we are excited to see in the Cowboys preseason game on Sunday. But let's start with just more Cowboys nonsense. It feels like Groundhog Day over and over and over again. Jerry Jones in a post-practice scrum yesterday said something to the effect of he doesn't feel like there's a lot of urgency to sign CeeDee Lamb before the preseason games get started. Now, that little part at the end was left off some big tweets, but we're going to ignore that.
Yeah.
Of course, CeeDee Lamb saw this within like 5 minutes and tweeted LOL. And then, of course, Micah Parsons retweets that. And then we get CeeDee Lamb scrubbing his social media of everything named Cowboys and America's team. And it's just a whole big ordeal.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm always a huge fan of having to talk about this stuff when there's real football to be talked about. But here we are, right? Like,
by the way, we're not gossip people. Like, if you want to watch like E, like that's just not me. But unfortunately, this is the business that we have to cover.
This is the stuff my wife would eat up, like, honestly. Look, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things here. First of all, the Dallas media is extremely savvy in getting information and getting kind of salacious things out of Jerry Jones. And really, it's a lot of how the wording goes, right? Like, the wording of the question, if you actually, and this is what's brilliant about, like, when you're speaking casually to somebody too, the wording of the question was, it wasn't, do you have any urgency, or do you feel a sense of urgency? Is any sense of urgency. The beginning of the sentence was any sense of urgency to get this signed. So that question actually could mean for all parties involved, for for anyone involved. And long story short, he said what he said. And I think we need to kind of step back and look at some history here, right? Like, this is what Jerry Jones does. What he did yesterday is the most Jerry Jones that Jerry Jones will ever Jerry Jones, right? Like, he's in the middle of a contract negotiation, like high profile, high stakes. He's wheeling and dealing and lying and BSing on national media, like creating a storyline for everyone to talk about. That's who Jerry Jones is. He did the same thing for Zach Martin. He did the same thing for Zeke Elliott. He's done the same thing for all of these contract negotiations where he's come out and made some comment like, oh, we'll find a way to get by without Tony Romo or, whatever. Like, this is how he does things. They negotiate hard, and that's the funny thing is that really in reality, if you were peek behind this, Jerry Jones is being taken to the woodshed right now, like by CeeDee Lamb's agent and by Dak Prescott's agent. He knows that. And I think ultimately he's trying to get some media information, some media, fire up so that people are talking about the Cowboys all across social media all day today and yesterday. And they did. As soon as like 2 minutes after CeeDee Lamb had retweeted LOL on social media, I saw like the most amount of content I've ever seen deluge in my feed, and people had graphics made up, and then everyone was ready. Like,
big trades were being made up on some of the different sports books. It was insane.
The Pavlovian response by fandom to freak out and the media to like promote that freak out was like, it's such a coordinated thing. It's incredible to watch. what's the reality of this situation? CeeDee Lamb's agent is in Paris at the Olympic Games. So clearly there's not an urgency by this side either, right? Like, so at the end of the day, if you want to be upset with Jerry Jones, you absolutely have every right to be upset with Jerry Jones, because I think, they put themselves in this situation. They have waited this long. Is any of this going to have any real effect on football coming in the 2024 season? Absolutely not. But we will talk about the contract and how much, much more money they're going to pay. And that those are aspects that are part of team building that, I think are worth having a conversation over. But the kind of back and forth in the media, the changing of social media stuff, like, come on now. That's just par for the course in our social media contract watching driven society at this point.
So I should also mention that as Jerry Jones was giving this impromptu interview, Stephen Jones was on a podcast with Ed Warder and I think it was Matt Mosley talking about all these contracts, right? And how they feel like they're getting close and they feel like they're getting good progress. I kind of wish they would just both shut up about the contract stuff until stuff gets done. Like, I know they're getting asked about it all the time, but they're also opening themselves up to talk about all this. They talked about it in the pre-draft presser on how hard it was going to be. They talked about it in the pre-training camp presser about where they're at and how Jerry Jones can stretch a dollar and make things work. Like, none of this stuff helps. And you and I were talking before the show, like some of these other big deals that have gotten done across the league, and they're all different and they all have different circumstances, like the Justin Jefferson deal in Minnesota, the Tyreek extension that he just got in Miami. There's not big national coverage of it. And maybe it's because it's the Dolphins and it's the Vikings, but the owners aren't coming out and saying that there's no urgency to get it done. And they're not trying to disparage their players in the national media. I wish Jerry Jones, I agree with you. I don't think anything's going to change. Like, I don't think what Jerry said yesterday is going to impact the ultimate number that CeeDee gets, but I wish they would just shut up about some of this stuff.
I certainly agree. I certainly think they should shut up. Like, but this is the juice for them, right? Like this, they like this, but because they're addicted to the attention. I think
it's just like honestly. No other front office in the league handles.
Oh, it's certainly not beneficial. No, I mean, look, I think you can make an argument that at one point it was beneficial, right? At one point, because it was building the profile of the star,
early in the 90s,
before social media. Yeah, yes. I think that there was something to that, right? That that's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary step now, but it's just part of what Jerry wanting to be kind of in the constant eye and of the storm and the kind of, to be the focus of everyone's attention, especially the media, right? So like that's always been a part of this, and frankly is going to be a part of this. I don't like it either. I don't, it's not beneficial, especially now. But I think that is, the biggest pain of it. I think the thing that really upsets me about this is that this was by far the most benign comment that Jerry has made. I mean, all he said was that there wasn't a sense of urgency, which again, I mean, clearly there's not. Like, clearly on both sides there's not, because first of all, the deal's not done, and it takes both sides to do the deal, and second of all, like we said, like CeeDee's agent is not even in town to be having these negotiations. I also would like to point out that I think that in this world where the players aren't negotiating their own contracts, they're not even involved in kind of, they obviously are up to date and they get up to date, but they're not like, I don't think that a lot of these guys like Dak or CeeDee honestly even know like how far they are from a deal at times, right? Like, I think they get updates and that sort of thing, but I don't know that they're like, they're clearly not in the negotiation or have the experience to know, hey, this is the part right before the breakthrough, right? So I also think that in the sense that we get told by these guys, hey, I leave that to my agent, I don't know what's going on. Like, I also think that that's, it's not necessarily CeeDee's LOL is not an indicator of where they are in contract negotiations, I think is what I'm getting at.
Probably not. It's just frustrating because, it feels like this is one of your very, very best players. Listen, I bet you within $1 million, we could predict on how much he's going to make a year. Maybe the holdup is the guarantees. Maybe the holdup is how many years the deal ultimately gets done. Spoiler, it's probably going to be 4 years because that's what Justin Jefferson signed, and these receivers just want to hit free agency again. So I just don't know how much wiggle room they have here. And it just all feels so unnecessary. And in a year that there's already so many distractions, do you really need to have one more little tiny thing on top of it all? I don't know.
Again, that's fair, but I also think this is a thing that happened very quickly. I don't know that this was planned. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is I think Jerry said something off the cuff and everyone had their full freak out. Now, the reason everyone's having their full freak out is because Jerry has put the mindset at this right now. Like, he's put us here. But at the same time, this specific thing doesn't really seem like a thing to me, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about some actual football stuff, Landon. Please.
Oh, yes. Please.
Let's talk about the Cowboys' joint practice that they had with the Rams and some of the biggest winners coming out of that practice next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, the Cowboys held a joint practice with the Rams yesterday. We got to see Dak Prescott work against the Rams starting defense. Same for Matt Stafford against the Cowboys. What were your biggest takeaways coming out of that practice?
Well, I think one of the first things that I really like to see was, how well the pass rush was getting after Matt Stafford at different points. I mean, I think obviously Parsons was having opportunities, but they were able to get push. It seems like from a couple different guys in specific pass rush drills. I'm more interested in the team stuff, like the one-on-one stuff.
It's nice to see, but it's whatever.
It's nice, but even especially when you're facing like a new opponent, it's like, sometimes you're still kind of feeling it out a little bit. And look, I mean, the Cowboys offensive line really I mean, it was like the backup offensive line really kind of had an up and down day at certain points against the Rams defensive line during pass rush drills. But as they started to get into practice, like it felt like things were starting to even out a little bit. I think the guy that I specifically mean is Awesome Richards. Like, I think Awesome, had kind of an up and down one-on-one period where he was going against Jared Verse, which is, again, he's a first round pass rusher. But then like as the kind of team stuff started to kind of get into it, he's definitely looked more comfortable. And honestly, by the third rep of his one-on-ones, they looked more comfortable. So, and even in what we saw in the videos from what DallasCowboys.com was released, it was a lot of Ball and Shipley and Waletzko. We didn't see any Guyton. I think I saw one rep of Terrence Steele maybe. So mostly it was the team stuff that was kind of the most helpful. And or the group stuff, the kind of run drill stuff. And I will say that on top of the pass rush, I think the second most exciting thing for me to see was how well the run. Well, not the fits, but the run schemes were working, right? Yeah. No, I'm sorry, on offense. I mean,
their run defense is pretty good as well.
The run defense also did look very good. Go ahead.
Well, now just context here. The Rams had 3 offensive line starters out. They've been decimated by offensive line injuries. But talking about the Cowboys run offense, I mean, Zeke had a couple of really nice runs. Dowdle had a big run. Seemed like they were creating big holes in the running game.
And Zeke, I mean, that looked like some good burst by Zeke for a guy that, like, I just certainly
It's
more
August.
burst than
It's
I expected from Zeke.
it's August. Let's relax.
Oh, see, no, I couldn't even give him a little August credit.
He looked good for an August practice. It's fine.
That's fine. I mean, like, honestly, it was more burst than I knew that Zeke had in his body. So let's put it that way. But it wasn't just Zeke. I mean, Rico also had some really nice runs, and I think the key thing there, honestly, was the blocking. Right, like. One of these guys that has really taken a lot of lumps, it feels like, in the media and from different folks is Chuma Edoga. And I thought Chuma Edoga had a really good practice yesterday in some of the pass rush stuff. And on that big run, the biggest one that Zeke ran, it was Edoga's kick out block that actually busted that thing loose. So I thought he had a really good practice. And I think that just the ones in general looked pretty sharp. There was a really, really nice throw from Dak to Cooks in the back of the end zone where he was getting pressured up the middle on a twist that was happening. And I think, there was a on that same play, Awesome Richards locked down his guy, and they were able to kind of block it up and give Dak just enough time to, toss it on a crossing. Cooks, who came across the back line, was able to snag that ball. So lots of kind of, good first team stuff, getting reps against the Rams ones on the offensive side. And on the defensive side, I felt like, especially early on, they were giving Stafford all that he could handle. You mentioned the offensive line injuries. And then things kind of settled down a little bit, and he was kind of able to get some passes. But, I think one thing that they pointed out on the broadcast, which I thought was really fantastic and was a great point that I had noticed as well, is like one of the things you really want to see in improvement in this offense, especially when you're in the context of these Shanahan offenses that have killed the Cowboys defenses. How are they reacting to the boots? How are they reacting to play action bootleg? Are the linebackers still overcommitting? Are they watching the ball and watching? There was a play yesterday where they ran a play action bootleg and Stafford ran back the other side with guys kind of coming across the formation in front of him as receivers. And I just watched Damone Clark, right? Because Clark specifically was one of these guys that really kind of struggled with that sort of transition. Watching him read the quarterback's eyes, not overcommit, come right back and be perfectly in sync with the receivers that were coming across the formation to take them out of capability of being receiving targets. That's the kind of stuff that is so important to see, right? These guys are playing with better eye discipline. They're not falling for the play action bootlegs. It's hard to measure a team's discipline during training camp because we don't know what the calls are. We don't know what their cues are. But things like that, where you know that he can't get overcommitted with his eyes, that he can't overcommit to that play action, and that he has to be available on the bootleg. And for him to see him run it like that, I think that was a very good sign for where this team is as far as their discipline and kind of running this defense.
I've just got 2 notes from yesterday. I mean, Dak was in total control. I mean, there was a play where I think it was Ernest Jones thought he was going to blitz, and then Dak called it out, and then he drops into coverage, and then Dak throws a dime to Brandon Cooks. Like, Dak is just at a stage in his career where you're just not going to fool him that often. Like, you kind of know he's seen everything at this point. I thought he was awesome yesterday. Yeah. And then I want to mention Mozzie Smith. He had a really nice one-on-one rep. I understand why everybody's excited about the one-on-one. The push-pull rep on Bo Leamer, I believe. One-on-one reps are designed for the defense to look good. So just with that in mind. But I thought in some of the team stuff, he looked really – that's not the word. I thought he looked good in some of the team stuff to help them stop the run, create push. Not saying he's going to be a superstar or anything, but he is definitely an improved player compared to what we saw at this time last year.
I think the area where we need to see, and I think you saw it at the end of practice, is that he's getting tired now, right? At the end of these practices. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he spent the offseason rehabbing shoulder surgery. So he didn't get a lot of time to kind of do a bunch of conditioning stuff on top of the fact that he's re-added back all this weight, right? So I think early on in the practice, he did look really, really good. Like his technique was right. As it kind of wore down, you saw it like a little bit kind of, get a little bit sloppy and kind of wear down, that's going to happen. He's going to be fine. But I think at this point now, we've reached the area where you've seen him do the techniques correctly. He can do it. Now it's about how do you get that consistently and how do we extend that window of consistency. And I think a big portion, I heard Brian Broaddus talk about this as well, so I want to make sure I'm crediting him. But I think a big part of what we need to see now is he needs to get a little bit better conditioning, which I think that's fine because again, he's spent the whole offseason in rehab and trying to gain weight.
Yeah.
So get a little bit better breath, right? And then I think that you're going to extend that window of consistent technique, and that's going to be really key for him.
All right, let's talk about the actual game that's going to happen on Sunday afternoon, Lane. And let's talk about a couple players that we are interested to see. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many quality professionals available that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you hire the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in all of the wrong places. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some of your self-care non-negotiables? Is it making sure that you go to the gym every day, not skipping that morning walk, or maybe it's a therapy day? When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even though we know it makes us happy when we do those things, sometimes it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever before. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Just visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, we will be back on Monday to break down everything from the preseason action game against the Rams, so make sure you tune in for that. But later, let's talk about some players that we are interested to see on Sunday. Who do you have your eye on?
Lots of these guys are going to be, kind of more just continuing the drumbeat guys, right? Like what's obviously, I want to see Jalen Tolbert continue what he's been doing in these camps. And again, especially since he's going to be playing against likely backups, right? Again, I mean, that's the majority of who's going to be playing in these games. If Tolbert gets out there for any extended period of time, I'd like to see him get a catch, do some things and continue that kind of drumbeat, then get out of there. And maybe we'll see him in a couple other preseason games a little bit later. But along the lines of those guys, like I think there's also a group of guys who just haven't seen very much from yet. Right. And that you're hoping maybe are more gamers, or maybe they've been injured or whatever. I know one of the guys that I'm excited to kind of just get more opportunities to see, because we just didn't see very much of him in training camp, is like Ryan Flournoy, right? Like a guy that was dealing with some injury. He finally came back into practice yesterday, had a nice catch along the sideline on a comeback route. So guys like that I just literally need to see more of. And then I think on top of that, there are obviously specific positions that are much easier to evaluate in a real life game situation. Obviously running back, defensive tackle, linebacker, these are all positions that, you have an idea, you see them when they can touch up these guys, but ultimately at the end of the day in live tackle reps, you want to see them taken to the ground to see exactly if they are able to kind of finish the plays that you think that they're going to be able to finish the plays in training camp. So definitely I'm interested to see Damone Clark, definitely interested to see Overshown. And we'll see how much he plays because he's still dealing with the injury. Definitely interested in seeing Dowdle and I don't know if Zeke's not going to get any carries, but I'm definitely interested in Dowdle, some Malik Davis, Snoop Connor, guys like that. Just to see, and my guy Hunter Lipke. I mean, they may hold him out because he's just too important for this team.
Can I give you one guy really quickly on that side of the ball?
Please, yeah.
I want to see Luke Schoonmaker play 25 snaps and get through those snaps and make a couple catches. He's just one of these guys where the durability just makes me so nervous. But it's one of these things, if you can get past the durability concerns, there is talent there. And he's a different type of player than Jake Ferguson. I think he can add an element to this offense that maybe they didn't have at times last year. So he's one of them. And then for me, it's just all the down roster offensive linemen: Cooper Beebe, TJ Bass, Austin Richards, Matt Waletzko, Nate Thomas. I don't know if Nate Thomas is going to play. He's been dealing with some.
Yeah, I don't know. He was out yesterday. I'm not sure what is going on there, but yeah.
But all the down roster offensive linemen, I want to see who stands out among those guys, who can put together a couple good drives in a row. I would assume in the case of TJ Bass and Cooper Beebe, those guys are probably going to play quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned the tackles as well. Obviously, let's go. I mean, I think Earl Bostic will get a lot of look, and we'll see exactly how he's developed a little bit. So I think there's tons of offensive defensive line guys to see as well. I think I'm excited to see Marshawn Nealon against some actual live reps and see how that plays out.
If you're going to say NFL tackles, I'd say,
I don't know. I think that might be more than to hope for, honestly. But I definitely like him. And I think another guy, Justin Rogers, and Mozzie, we just talked about it. I think both of those guys will get opportunities. I want to see how they hold up in live play. And how well they're able to kind of, sustain on a whole drive or on multiple drives, that sort of thing. Those are guys that obviously are going to be, a huge. And look, we're kind of bypassing the headliner of the preseason, which is, Trey Lance is the headliner of this preseason in a lot of these games, because we're not going to see, a ton of these starters, and they're just not going to, it's just not how the NFL prepares anymore. Nowadays, the true elite starters like the Dak Prescotts and the CeeDee Lambs, they're ever going to see a preseason down, right? So ultimately, it's about preseason games for guys like that, right? That you're still trying to find out exactly what you have in this guy, and I think. Look, I thought he had a really good practice yesterday. Trey Lance did. Had a couple really good throws, and maybe there's much like Dak was early in his career. Maybe he's a little bit of a gamer. Maybe once he gets in there, you'll see some of that stuff kind of slow down. And again, it's been a progression with Trey Lance, and this is the next step for him, is to see, can he maintain the learned footwork throughout a game. Now that you're getting live bullets, now that you're getting hit, now that it's actually people competing, do you have the kind of discipline to continue to use your techniques, or are you going to revert back to what you were doing before? So I think it's going to be we've talked about this for a long time. It's going to be a really, really huge preseason for Trey Lance and his ability to kind of command the offense and command his own footwork.
And the last thing I want to say is, more so than even watching offense or defense, it's the special teams. It's the kickoff rules.
Yeah,
I want to see
rules.
First of all, I want to see what type of players Bones Fosso's deploying on the return unit and the kickoff unit. Is it smaller, more athletic guys? We got a little bit of yesterday. It seemed like it was more the tight end types, right? Like that body type. And then I want to see who's being the returners. How many returners are they using? Are they using split returners or one returner so they could have more blockers? I'm fascinated by the special team stuff.
I heard a new wrinkle yesterday, which is really fascinating, is that I've heard that there are some teams that are trying to put taller players on the front line of the kickoff return, because I got to remember the idea of the rule, but the rule states that if you touch the ball before there's some rule that they found that if you actually swat the ball out of the air, that you automatically get it on the 40-yard line, because of the way that the teams are coming. They have to get across a certain amount of distance before the returner touches it. Yeah. So I'm interested to see it, but the bottom line is that it seems like teams have found a way to kind of reverse engineer this into doing some really tricky stuff. So I'm really fascinated to see. Obviously, the kind of traditional how does it work? And they run through the lines, but also the double reverse passes. And
well, I also I've heard and read about some teams using non-kickers as the kickoff man here, not because they want to try to kick more line drive shots, and if they can get another linebacker body, again, or maybe a tight end body on the field, it's just going to help with tackling, right? So maybe we'll see that. I mean, we haven't heard anything from Bones about different players being used in the kickoff game, but man, this would have been like great for Jeff Heath. If
I was just gonna say, man, how can we call Jeff Heath back? Can we get him back on the team? Bueller is another. I mean, it's like the Cowboys have had 4 of these guys who were in the league way too early, unfortunately, for this kickoff role.
Do you know who also was a former kicker that could have done this for Dallas? Remember Danny Cole, who the Cowboys?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Danny White, if you want to go that far, I can
all
go
the way back to the 80s.
That's right, man. I mean, listen, that's back when football used to be like truly football, like
a real sport. When your quarterback was your punter.
Yeah, people didn't LOL on tweets and everything. Like you actually had people like playing a physical sport and being, tough. So it's not quite like what it is today.
It's when you had linebackers like Hollywood Henderson returning kicks back in the 70s, right?
Salute to you, Hollywood Henderson. Go Cowboys.
All right. That is it for today's show. What a wild show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. You can find the link to the Locked On Fantasy Football show in the description of this podcast, making it so easy for you. Just click on it. You'll go right to the show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go check out the Locked On Cowboys podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy the first Cowboys game of the season, albeit a preseason game, and we will see you right back here on Monday.